Hey everyone, welcome to the NoochieCast, episode 8. We're back, still in quarantine, still, affected really pretty harshly by the coronavirus. And, I've heard that some YouTube channels are getting demonetized for saying that word, which sucks, and that's a whole different issue. But I don't really have that many consistent viewers at this point, and I'm just gonna continue to say it because fuck you. Also because it's just a public service, and I don't really understand why they would not allow you to say it, because it's like an actual thing that people should be talking about. But, the show must go on. Life is life, and gaming is gaming. And as I mentioned last time, there are a lot of things that are more important than gaming right now. People being safe, people, staying healthy, but this is a gaming podcast, and I'm going to continue talking about gaming because that's my specialty, and that's what I know how to do. So with that, we have a bunch of news items, and by a bunch, I mean actually only 2, but they're both big because they're really, every news item is big these days. You know how when nothing's happening, anything that happens is big news? Well, here, that's kind of what's happening. So first is still, COVID-19 still happening, and things are starting to get affected. And like I mentioned last week, or last episode, the delays are starting to come by. We saw earlier this week or last week, Final Fantasy VII will not be delayed, although Square Enix sent out a memo that they cannot control when the game is physically released because of, different quarantines and stay-at-home orders and everything like that. So some of the stores may have broken street dates. Some of them might not get into people's hands if they ordered physically until much later. But it looks like that's one of the final games that won't be affected, at least big games, because there aren't really that many big games between now and the end of May. And, of course, what I'm talking about then is that The Last of Us Part 2 has officially been delayed indefinitely because of the coronavirus. Now, PlayStation sent out a memo that this is because of logistical reasons, that The Last of Us there's no path. The way that they worded it, it was very PR, but the way that they worded it basically mentioned that it's not because the game needs to be worked on anymore or because they need any more time necessarily than just May 29th to create the game, but because they couldn't physically get the game into people's hands by then. And like I mentioned last time, that's not surprising at all. I really expected this. I think this is the first in a wave of a bunch of games that are going to be delayed. I don't see a way that something like Ghost of Tsushima isn't delayed. Even like Avengers, probably. I feel like that's in September, and I mean, it's going to be difficult if this kind of thing. We don't know how much longer this is going to go, but if this goes like a month or 2 longer, those are 2 very, very important months for development of games that are coming out in just a few months. And we already heard that CD Projekt Red said that they don't think they're going to delay Cyberpunk, but again, at this point, I think that's really hard to say. Game that was already delayed, and now who knows how well they're able to work on it. On The Last of Us, there was an article that mentioned Neil Druckmann said that they are still potentially trying to release it digitally, or at least they haven't decided a firm no on releasing it digitally on May 29th, which would be interesting, but I also don't see that happening in any way. The Last of Us is such a big game that for it to have a staggered release like that, like almost mirroring what an indie game does, where they release it digitally first and then later on they'll release it physically. It'll get that physical release in stores, usually only after it's done really well, like a Fortnite kind of deal. I don't see that happening in any way. Like, there's no way that The Last of Us comes out digitally to only, like, the people who can download it, which, even in this day and age, is not everyone. There are so many people who aren't able to do that or don't have the capability or bandwidth or data cap ability to download that big of a game. And for Sony to potentially release it digitally in May and then physically later just doesn't really make sense to me. When this game, you know, is probably just waiting for the quarantine to be over, and you imagine is hopefully, like I said, it's only going to be like a month and a half more, and then it gets out and they release it in like late June. Like that's what I feel like is a best case scenario here. Quarantine ends and they just, you know, have a couple of weeks or a month at most that they just need to get things ramped up to create it physically and have it go officially gold, because I don't believe it's gone gold yet technically. And to have that all happen, for it to just go and get out to everyone. That's where I'm hoping this will be. But there's also an argument where this quarantine goes on for another few months, where people are going to have to work from home for like into June, maybe into July, and this game does not come out until September. That would be probably a worst case scenario for me. At least in my eyes, that's where I think the worst case scenario would be, because I don't think it will go as far as to affect next gen consoles. We'll actually get to that in the next story, but it could happen. Who knows? It's all of this is just kind of a who's to say right now. We really don't know. It's all about just if people can take precautions and be safe and be quarantining and not spread the virus, then we'll all be out of here in a few weeks and games will be back on pace, hopefully. But, you know, we never really know. And my prediction right now would probably be mid-July, like late June, early mid-July, probably somewhere within that couple of week stretch for The Last of Us's release. But we really don't know. And then Ghost of Tsushima as well. Was scheduled to come out in July, I'm pretty sure. And I don't see a way that that's not delayed in any way. Like, that'll probably just be pushed back to September also, to just make a packed September, which would be cool. But, you know, we never really know. So that, yeah, like I said, just kind of a don't really know what's going to happen. That's where my prediction is. But we'll probably get more updates as time goes on, both in how far along they are in this game and what they're going to do digitally versus physically and what their eventual plans are. The one thing I will say, kind of a silver lining, is that Naughty Dog over the past few weeks has taken a lot of heat for the crunch culture that they have, and this will hopefully allow them to kind of squash that, because hopefully, I don't know if it's true, but hopefully they're able to have their employees who are working from home not have to put in 20-hour days to squash bugs, and instead, you know, put in that same amount of time that they would be putting in from now until launch, do that same amount of time just over a longer period of time and put in, you know, normal work days, which, you know, that's something that you really hope they are able to do, and they don't still have to crunch in the way that they do before. But anyway, next story. Also, there's some correlations here with the coronavirus, but also just a lot of larger themes in terms of gaming and where we're going. And this came from an interview that Phil Spencer did with Ryan McCaffrey on IGN's podcast Unlocked. I watched this. I've been outspoken that I love Phil Spencer, what he's done with the platform, with Xbox over the past 6 years since he took over. I believe he's just been super transparent. He's one of my personal probably favorite executives in the gaming industry, which I feel like there aren't that many, but like, you know what I mean. He's just someone that I think has done a really good job with taking a botched launch with the Xbox One and at least putting in a lot of goodwill with consumers so that we or they are a little more inclined to like Xbox, because at the start of the generation, it really felt like Microsoft was just coasting and not really taking the consumers into account. And I think over the course of the generation, like I mentioned when we did the review of the both consoles generation, I think Xbox has done a lot more innovative things to help consumers, to what seems like putting consumers first, and what they've lacked in software and games, they've really made up in services like Game Pass and things like that. And to see where Xbox is going to go next in comparison with PS5, I think will be really, really interesting. We already know that the tech specs came out for both, and it looks just numerically, just in terms of like sheer power, that the Series X is at least a little bit more powerful in terms of teraflops and whatever. But that's one thing that Phil Spencer mentioned on this interview, is that he felt like, in terms of power, he felt really good. I think that was a quote. He felt, quote, really good, end quote, that the Series X is a lot more powerful, and that in terms of price, he's also feeling really good, which I'm a little confused about. I've seen people trying to predict prices for the PS5 and Series X. I'm not 100% convinced they've decided on a price yet. They probably, I mean, they definitely know the range that it'll be, but they may have, I don't know, they may be thinking either $499 or $599 or maybe $549 or things like that, where it's, you know, they're trying to see where the market goes, and maybe this whole global pandemic will affect that, because he mentioned that they don't think they don't have a plan B on pushing back launch, and maybe a global recession, the global pandemic will lead into a global recession, and they need to lower the prices so that people need to have less disposable income to buy the Series X. So maybe that's kind of pushing the price down. Like I said, I'm not 100% convinced they've decided on one. They definitely, if they don't have one in mind and they haven't said it yet, they definitely have a couple that they're deciding between. But in terms of price, people trying to predict that it'll be $599. I'm gonna predict $499, just because $599 feels like so much. Like, maybe it's just me being like, I don't know, pretty like still in college and everything, but like $600 compared to seeing $400 consoles come out just a few years ago, or like the Xbox One X was $500 when it came out. That feels like the right price point to me. So like I'm gonna predict $499 for both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Who knows? I don't think any of them or either of them will be able to bring it down to $399, because it's just, there's so much power and there's so much like computing things. I don't understand computers in the box, but who knows? Maybe Phil Spencer's saying here he thinks they're going to be the same price, and that Series X is more powerful, so that's just a more enticing deal for a customer. I don't really know what he's saying. Sometimes, like, he's both really good at being transparent and being a little cryptic at the same time, but at least being transparent about when he's being cryptic, which I appreciate. One of the other things he had mentioned was, like I had said, he doesn't have a plan B in terms of the release date for the console if it has to be pushed back for coronavirus reasons. If for some godforsaken reason we are still in a quarantine at this point, or this is probably the more likely scenario, if supply lines, the supply chain has been so fucked by this whole situation that they're not able to produce the same amount of chips or boxes or just hardware that they would want to create for launch, to be able to launch it worldwide at the same time. Phil Spencer mentioned that he doesn't want to stagger launches worldwide. Like, he doesn't want to release first in the US and then go to Europe later and then to Japan or Asia after that, like they did with the Xbox One, because that hurts them in the long run. But if they're going to do that, then there's a higher chance that they will be fucked by the chips being unable to be produced by companies, because they probably produce them in China, or honestly, it doesn't really matter where they're produced because everyone's affected by this. I think there is a chance that happens, and that's, to be honest, kind of scary. That just even to think that people are going to be affected by this for the next 8 or 9 months, because I'm assuming a November launch is where they're anticipating, like late October to November launch, and to say that that's still going to be like this virus is still going to be a problem by then is really scary. Just in like a global sense, like who knows what will have happened by then if we're still affected by it. And on the gaming sphere, to have console launches pushed back has to take something monumental. And to have this, like, I would say this is already a monumental moment to see so many games being pushed back and so many things happen, even just within gaming, then obviously outside, a bunch of other shit happening. But, we'll see. It's, again, there's so much of this that's just so hard to see what's going to happen. There's no predicting. We just hope that everything goes back to normal. Everyone is able to get back to their lives, and that we can see an Xbox Series X launch on time. So that's the news. Things are pretty bleak right now. I don't know. We're all just trying to stay positive. It's pretty hard to do that right now, but we're all just trying to do our best. I'm coping most of the way by just playing a lot of games. I'm lucky enough to be able to have roommates that I am able to see pretty much every day. Well, every day, because that's kind of all we can do. And one of the ways that we're coping as a group is just playing a lot of games together. So I have been playing a lot of games. One that I've been playing is I mentioned that I'd started Shadow of the Colossus last time. I have since finished it. Just general reflections on it. I enjoyed it to a point, but I didn't, like, maybe it was just high expectations. I didn't love it as much as everyone else says that they loved it, mostly because I think it kind of just got stale by the end. It was like, okay, here are 16 bosses, but we only really have ideas for like 12 or 13. So let's just make the final ones, and specifically like the last two, just not even that difficult, just so annoying. And like the if you've played it, the second to last boss is one where you have to get it to like step on a platform on the side of the thing, on the side of like the arena, so you can jump up onto a different ledge. I had done that. This is just me ranting at this point, but I had done that at least once or twice, and it didn't work. Like, I had been on the thing, and then he stepped on the thing, and then I like jumped, and it didn't catch on or something. Maybe it's me being stupid, or maybe like it was just a glitch or something like that. And so I just abandoned that thought, because it was like kind of early on that I was like, oh, what's over here? Like, why can't I just like go jump on here? Because it's clear that I have to go up. But it didn't do that. So I spent like a good hour and a half trying to like jump onto his hand and then have his hand go close to the thing so I could jump on the thing. until I eventually just looked it up because I was getting so frustrated. And yeah, so the scale was really cool. There were a couple bosses. I'd say like 4 or 5 really, really cool highlights. Like the ones where the flying ones were really cool, where you're just in the air and you're like, oh, you're trying not to get pulled away, but you're also like trying to kill these things. Those are really cool. But there were a few in there that I was just like, this could have done without this boss. One of the other games I've been playing was for a review for Gaming Bolt. You can go check it out on their website or on their YouTube channel. Is One Piece Pirate Warriors 4, set in the One Piece universe. This series is... Now, I'm not a huge fan of One Piece. I like generally kind of know the story, but the way that it just goes through the story, like the same story every time, is really weird to me. This one added a new arc, so if you're interested in that, then that's cool. I go through this a lot more in depth in the review, but I really liked it. It's like a Dynasty Warriors game where you're just killing thousands of enemies at once, but it's really cathartic. If you like One Piece, you're gonna like this. So, other one that I've been playing, actually one that I just started, was Ni no Kuni 2: Revenant Kingdom. The original Ni no Kuni was one of my favorite games of the PS3 generation because it was, I think it was one of my first JRPGs, if not my very first JRPG. I remember thinking, like, I don't know what this is, but it's getting really good reviews, and I'm just, like, trying to see what's up. And then I played it, and I was like, holy shit, this game is amazing. Like, the music is amazing. The animation is amazing. The story is really good. I'm really enjoying the gameplay, even though it's kicking the shit out of me. And Ni no Kuni 2 came out. I was really excited for it, and then it just came out in like a weird time, and I never played it. And now, it was on sale, and I just picked it up, and I'm a couple hours in. So far, the gameplay it moved away from the like half turn-based, half real-time combat that the first game had, to more of a just real time, which I'm a little concerned about because it feels pretty generic at this point. When I finish it, I'll come back. Hopefully I will finish it at some point. I will come back and give a full, more in-depth thoughts on it. But right now it seems like it's more Ni no Kuni. It doesn't have as much of the heart so far as the first one did. It's hard to match that, but it doesn't. And the combat's a little weird, but I still love that world. And that idea, and that just like the art style still is really amazing, and all the characters are really cool. So we'll see. We'll get there. But number one, the one that I've been playing mostly, is the one that I want to do my main topic on this week, and that is I started, played through, and finished the game that didn't get as much love last year, at least initially, as now that I've played it, it really should have. And that is Control from Remedy. Came out in a bit of a weird time last year, like late August. So it was it was both squished by a couple other launches, like Astral Chain came out, I think, on the same day, but also like at a weird like late August time, is kind of not at the start of the game release schedule for the fall yet. Or it's like just at the forefront of it. But, I saw it when it came out, and I've never played Alan Wake, but I did play Quantum Break when that came out, and I really liked Quantum Break a lot more than other people did, because I felt like the gameplay was really cool, and I really liked the story. And like the story kind of fucking weird, but it was still really cool. And really interesting. And I also really liked the TV portions of it because like it allowed you to make choices, and there were just some really cool aspects of it that if some of them didn't hit, they were all just really interesting and trying to be innovative. Even if, putting a TV show in a game is kind of, I don't know, a little like maybe regressive because we're trying to be our own art form, but I don't know. Crossing mediums it's cool. It was a cool idea, and I really enjoyed it. But Control, coming from the same developer, seemed like a really cool idea. It seemed, because it wasn't Xbox exclusive, it was a little lower key, oddly enough, because it wasn't getting as much of a push from Microsoft that Quantum Break did. But it even showed up at PlayStation's stage in 2018 at E3. So it did get a little bit of buzz, and it got good reviews when it came out. But I feel like it at least a little undersold, or undersold compared to what other big games will do. So I was a little concerned about it, never played it. I actually said that I wasn't going to buy it because I very strongly anticipated it coming to Game Pass at some point, which I still do. I will still say that I anticipate it, especially now that I've bought it. I think it's going to come to Game Pass even more. But I just saw it was on sale again, and I picked it up and played through it. And oh my fucking God, this game is so good. Now, this game won a bunch of Game of the Years last year, most notably IGN's, which was really shocking to me because I thought they'd give it to, I don't know, whatever other game last year, but like a Sekiro or things like that. But this winning kind of made a statement to me that there was something special here, that even if not everything was perfect, or that things didn't necessarily hit all the time, that there was something that was really cool here that hadn't been done before, or that it was really innovating in a way. And I think I agree with IGN, not necessarily that it's Game of the Year, because I think it's I'll go through this in a bit more, but I think this is my number 2 for last year. But in that there is a lot of innovative shit here. So I did say I don't think it's my Game of the Year for last year, because just the more I think about it, Control was really cool, and I'm going to go into a full review here. But I do think Death Stranding is still my Game of the Year for last year, because that was just more of like a transcendent experience where I could feel myself getting lost in Death Stranding for 40 plus hours in the course of like a week or two. And that was before quarantine. And there were a couple of moments here where I was like, like this part's fine. I didn't love this. With Death Stranding, that just didn't happen. I felt like Death Stranding was like a really, really cool experience. So I think I'm going to keep my Game of the Year for last year the same, but Control will be slotted in at a firm number 2. And here's why. Basically, here's the full reasons why. One of the big things that Control does really, really well is creating a bunch of different ways to play it that don't feel forced. And they all feel equally valid, and they're all incredibly useful. Now, by that I don't mean like the thing where every game nowadays is doing, oh, you choose how you play, go guns blazing or go stealthy or some combination of the two. What I mean is that it has the different guns, or the different like forms of the gun that you have, plus it has all the abilities, plus it has your like ability to just run through or go wherever you want. It's basically an open world game, or I guess it is an open world game in a weird sense, but in its combat, it's like there are a bunch of different ways you can play it, and I felt like I was using everything all the time. And that's something that I rarely ever say about a game. So you have your gun, which can be set into 4 different modes, I believe. There's like the regular pistol mode, the fully automatic rifle mode, the shotgun mode, and the sniper mode. And all of them had their uses, and I used all of them individually on their own. That's what individually means. And there are, I believe, 5 different powers that you have. There's the dash, the shield, the levitate, the seize, which is like taking control of someone and making them on your team, and the like pick up and throw things from the environment. In terms of the shooting, I just think that was really tight. Like I said, I used all of them, and they were all really useful. But I felt like it was all really it felt really good. The shooting was like a really cool, really like well-made shooting like experience. And all the powers really cool. Like I just really liked the everything you could do. I would just naturally gravitate towards doing the little like gravity gun thing where you can just pick up a thing and throw it, like basically anything from the environment. But also the dash was real, like it was useful, and I would just like do that like I do in a lot of games, but I just, dash out of the way. The levitate was cool because you could just like get up and like stay in the air and fly over everything. And it just felt really diverse, and like I was never really doing the same thing over and over again. Part of it was because of the gameplay just being there being so many enemies and so many different environments, and things like that. There were, they're the regular grunts that are just shooting at you, but there are also the enemies with the big shields who throw things back at you, or, the flying enemies that are just up in the air, and then they either throw things at you or they like charge at you, and they're fucking annoying. And so this game it is open world in a way. It's like open building, I guess. I initially got RE2 vibes because like in RE2, I'm sure there are other games like this, but RE2 was just the one that came to mind, where you're just like going around and here you're in this room, but here's this door that's locked. And so you need to go to the other side of the building to get the key for this door. But in that room, there's another door that's locked. And on the way, you passed one that this key could open, and like things like that. So you're going back and forth in one building, and it's really economical in its space. I initially got that vibe here. It's kind of true in a way because you're all in one building the whole time. But the building is so big that it effectively just feels like an open world where you're just like, oh, I'm on like level 1 now, and now I'm on level 2, and level 1 is like really big, and level 2 is like really, really big, and level 3 is a little smaller, but level 4 is also like one of those things where it's like really complex, but you're basically just going from one place to another. You're not really trying to backtrack that much. So in that sense, I thought the level design was going to be a little more intricate than it was. But at the same time, I thought it was still interesting because you could go out and find things just organically that you might have been supposed to find later. There were a bunch of like hidden or like not secret because they're not hidden behind anything, but different rooms that you aren't supposed to be in until you have like a power that you can use later. So it's kind of that like Metroidvania-ish sense, but then there are also the ones that are, you have a certain security, like confidentiality level. I don't know what it's called. Where you're like, you start at level 1 and then eventually you move up the chain where you can get into level 1s, and then you can get into level 2s, and then eventually up to like 9 or something like that. But right in the first couple of areas, there are a couple level 6 rooms that contain a bunch of upgrades and things like that. So there is an incentive to go back in that RE2 sense. But at the same time, it's much more just guided, and not where in RE2 it doesn't really tell you where to go. The map has a couple of icons that might show you like, oh, you need this key to go here and this key to go there, and you have to go like up these stairs and this is blocked. Whereas this one, it's just like, here's where you need to go. So it's a little more guided, but at the same time, it is a little hard to get around sometimes. This is one of my gripes with it. There are a couple times where I just straight up didn't know where to go because the map is just, it's a toggle on and off. It's not like a pause the game and get there in the menu. So you just press up on the D-pad and like that's the map, and you can run around behind it. There were a bunch of times where I'm like, all right, well, I don't have a fucking clue where to go, and I really don't want to keep going back to the map, so I would just keep the map on and then run through and then run into enemies and die, which was annoying. But there were also times where the map is annoying in that it only shows a certain sector, which is basically a level. So it only shows, like, you're on, like, level 1, like, the first floor. But then you can go, like, up or down, and then it just doesn't tell you where the stairs are. This is kind of a minor gripe. This was just something that was kind of annoying to me. But I will say, in terms of level design, it was pretty diverse, especially at the end, because you get to a bunch of spots that may or may not be like, or they are in the building, but they're like, they're kind of doing their own thing. So they're like they can basically be whatever they want. And then just in terms of total level design, I think the modern chic that it had, where it's like the squares, going in and out of each other to like open up new paths and things like that. I just think that's a really cool aesthetic. And so I just really liked the art in this and the general design of how everything was played out. One thing, sorry for the spoiler, but one thing, the best sequence in the game, and I remember I listened to a review of it. I want to say it was the Kind of Funny review of it when it came out. The no spoiler, but it was the no spoiler review, but they had mentioned this like one late game mission where Jesse's like, all right, let's do this, and then you go in. I'm just going to spoil it. So it's the mission where you go in and you're like trying to get through this maze. And there's the janitor has given you the soundtrack to it that'll help you get through it, and it's just playing this like the theme song for the game, and you're going through this like supernatural area and killing a bunch of enemies. That was one of the best gaming moments of, if not just 2019, then like of the past generation. Like I was basically going back and replaying it. Now I did die a couple times, so like I had to go back and replay it, but there were a couple times where I was like, you know what? I just want to go back and replay this, so I just immediately died. And like I just really wanted to go back and re-experience that level because it was so fucking cool. It was just like you were a badass. This song is amazing. Like this song is an absolute soundtrack to this game. And I love it. And I think that was just like a really cool encapsulation of what the game is. And then right after that, again, spoiler, but right after that, you like go in and you're like, oh, whatever. Like the game like faux ends, and then you have the credits that it does the start of the actual credits that play later. It's like Control, like directed by Sam Lake and whatever, coming up, and then it starts to fuck up like kind of a like creepypasta kind of thing. Where it's just like everything fucks up and you're like, oh shit, this game is not over. And then it goes into a 10th chapter that's like really cool, kind of confusing, and I will say the 10th chapter's gameplay fucking annoying. Like just did not enjoy it. I had to cheese it to get through it. But a story 10th chapter that was really cool. And I just thought that going into it was kind of that was a really cool way to do it. And then in terms of the overall story, I did really enjoy it. Like I said, the story in the 10th chapter was really cool to kind of start to wrap things up. But I thought the story throughout did a really good job of not being so obsessed with itself that it had to explain everything. That it was just like, you're in this world and you, like, here you are. And like Jesse does do a lot of talking to herself, or talking to like you, which is the Polaris, like the being that's like in her mind, which I thought that was a really cool thing to do, because you right at the start of the game, you don't know what that means. Like for the first chapter or two, I thought she was talking to me, the player. Like I thought she was saying like, hey, Nooch, what's up? Like, how are you? And then you realize that she's talking to this being that's inside her head, almost Beyond Two Souls style, where there's just like, here's this thing that's inside you. like, and kind of helping guide you. And I thought that was really cool. And even with the exposition that she does to talk to Polaris, like, it's not like the game sits you down, at least right at the start, and is like, look, here you are. Like, it doesn't like punch you in the face with exposition saying like, look, here's what the hiss are, and here's where they're coming from, and things like that. It's things you have to piece together, and by the end, you get it. Like, you know what's happening. But it's not so, like, it's not like a virus, pardon the relation to world events, but it's not like The Last of Us, for example. One of the best stories that's ever been told in games, I will say. But it's not like The Last of Us where they're kind of like, here's this virus and it's infecting everyone, and here's all the clickers. Like, it's not a better story than The Last of Us. Don't get me wrong, but it does have an interesting thing where it doesn't necessarily explain why everything's happening. It explains what's happening, because you have to know, like, here's the hiss, and here's what you have to do. Like, here's your objective. You have to know what your objective is, but it's not like, oh, here's why everything is happening and here's how it all happened. So I thought the story was really cool. At the end, though, I did like the 10th chapter. It was a really interesting chapter. There were a bunch of threads, or at least a couple of threads, that I was like a little confused about, specifically the janitor. Like, they never really explained the janitor. They were just like, he gives you the cassette, and then you run back, and then you never see him again. Like, I didn't really get that. Unless I missed something. I might have missed something. But that was cool. And one of the other things that I really appreciated was how effective it was at conveying story through collectibles. I know a lot of games do this, and it's probably not the best that I've ever played at doing this, and there were so many collectibles that I really just got tired of reading them by the end. But at least at the start, it was cool where you would pick up like a file on something, and you would be able to read it and kind of understand what was happening. Like, they would have files on the hiss, and like, who are the hiss and what happened to them, or files on the town where Jesse and Dylan got, like, they went to that Altered World event, and here's what happened there. Also, side note, that fight in that town where they have that like model recreation of the town, and then you go into the dump where they like just took the dump and like moved it here, was awesome. Like, that was just cool. That's the second best moment of the game, beside the music moment. That was really cool. But the fact that you could just like gather so much information, and it was really up to you how much you cared to get as much information about the story as you wanted, because like you could just go through everything and really understand everything. And yeah, I think that was what made the story really click for me. Was there were a bunch of times where even when I would skip the collectibles, there were times where I would see it and it would be like, oh, here's what happened in like this Altered World event, or here's what the hiss are, and it's like, oh, part 1, part 2, part 3 kinds of things, where it's like basically like asking you to read it, because you're like, it's multiple parts, this is probably important. And those are the ones that were really cool. And outside of the story, I thought the side missions were also really cool. I want to go back. I finished the story and everything, but I'm considering going back and playing through it to get the platinum, because I just really enjoyed it that much. One of the things I really enjoyed were the side missions, because they gave you such a different way to play. There was the one, well, not the one, like the 5, but the one I'm thinking of was the boss was the anchor, and you're basically just at this boss, and the game just turns into it's a tired analogy, but it basically just turns into like a Souls-like game, because you're going into this boss and you're like, I don't know who you are. Like, it closes the door behind you, and you just have to like run around and figure out how to kill this boss, and you're gonna die a lot, and you don't know how to kill it. Like, it'll show you how to damage it, or it'll give you a lot of hints, but you just basically have to guess, and it took me 15 or 20 tries to beat it because I'm just getting closer and closer and closer every time. And that was probably one of my favorite just like in gameplay moments, especially outside of the story, where you're just like, oh, side mission, cool, I'll just go and like see what this fucking like altered object is. And oh, it's actually a big boss fight that is terrifying and also really cool. And there are a bunch of those throughout the story, or throughout the side missions. So yeah, outside of that, one of the other big problems with it, for sure, was technically how it ran. I played on a base PS4 because I still have my launch PS4. That I mean, for the most part, it played it fine, but I could pretty consistently get it to stutter. Like, and by stutter, I don't mean like go down to like 25 frames a second. I mean like it would just stop moving for a bit. Like I thought the game would crash. It did crash a couple times actually, but I'd be like, oh, like game crashed, because it would be just like not moving for 5 seconds. And I could get it consistently when I would come out of a pause, or when I would just have a lot of moving pieces, which makes sense if there are a lot of moving pieces, that it would take a lot more power and not be able to render frames as quickly. But it was a little frustrating at points where I would just be like mid-combat, and it would, it'd go down from 30 to like 12 frames a second, or like 5 frames a second, or 0 frames a second, and I'm just like, well, fuck, I'm dead. But at the same time, just the last thing I will say, one of the things that I think was super innovative about it was the way it uses physics. And it's not necessarily like games haven't been striving for this, but I think this is one of the more impressive uses of physics in games that I've seen recently, and specifically in how it interacts with every object. So you can go around, and one of my favorite single like small moments of this was you could go and since almost every object in the world is movable, because you're able to pick anything up and throw it at an enemy or wherever. Like there was one where there's a projector shooting or projecting film, like, and showing a movie on a wall, and I would go up to it and I would run into it, and it would tilt forward and then come back, and the movie would tilt forward with it and come back. It wouldn't just like automatically turn off like it would in a lot of other games. Like it would tilt forward and come back, and then keep playing the movie on the wall, and then I would knock it over, and it would play the movie sideways while on the ground and in like the right place, and then I would pick up the projector and run with it, and the movie would still be projecting in the right place, and then I'd throw it, and I lost it, so I don't know what happened there, but I just think that was such a cool way to do it. And then you just see how like every object in the world is movable, like chunks of concrete from the walls are movable, and you can just like rip them off the wall and throw them at people, or throw them at enemies, not people. So that's one where I would hear conversations of people saying, even though this game doesn't run that well, I could definitely see it being a contender for best tech in a game for 2019, because of all the things it does technically, specifically with those physics. And I think I didn't really understand how that would work, because I would think like, being able to run well is kind of a big part of being technically proficient. But now that I see it, I definitely agree with that, and I definitely understand where people are coming from, saying that this was a really technically impressive game, even if it didn't always run well all the time. Because when it did run well, it was fucking amazing. I don't know if I want to give it a score, things like that. Like, I didn't give Death Stranding a score, but I think like Death Stranding would approach a 10 for me. It was just so good. It would probably be something like on a 100-point scale, I'd give it like a 9.8, something like that. I don't know if it's a 10, but it would be close. This game might be like a 9.5, I think. a 9 or a 9.5, something like that. Like I just enjoyed it so much. I went in being like, oh, like it's gonna be cool. Maybe it's just more Quantum Break, which I really enjoyed, but definitely had flaws. I think this took what Quantum Break did. You could definitely see a lot of Quantum Break in it, but it's just it made it so much better. It made the story more coherent. It made the gameplay and the story more related, and like it didn't try to like force in, like, on Quantum Break it made the powers that he had, like time shield and like time fucking whatever, that like didn't really make sense. This one does. Like, it does make sense. Gameplay and story are really well related to each other, and it's just such an impressive piece of software that Remedy has created here. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Control. I really, really enjoyed it. We'll see if I go back. I'm kind of got a lot of other games to play while in quarantine, so we'll see. But yeah, I was just really excited about it. I just thought it was really cool. So that's Control. And like I said, it's probably my number 2 game of the year for 2019. And that will about wrap it up. So yeah, that was the NoochieCast episode 8. I'll be back again soon with another episode. I know this didn't come out on normal Friday. It's coming out on Saturday because of a slight recording restriction that I had. But I'll be back in a week. So thank you for listening, and I will be seeing you soon.